there. Today's lesson is coming from the book of Genesis, chapters 34 and 35. And in this part of the Bible, we are following what has been going on with Jacob and his family. Now, at this time, Jacob had 11 sons and at least one daughter. We don't know about any of the other daughters except this one who is named, and her name is Dinah. And Joseph lived, and his family, of course, was really a lot bigger than just the relatives who were in the family because there would also be servants or hired people, but they would all be considered part of the family of Jacob or part of his people at this time. And uh, pretty much they were to follow the rules with Jacob as the patriarch. But we find in this story that no, this is not always the case, that people do not always follow the rules that you would think that they did. And here's what happened that shows us this. All right, with Jacob's daughter Dinah, uh, we don't know how old she was. She was, I guess, of marrying age because there was this guy named Shechem who really liked her. Now, he was part of a group of people who lived in this area as well, and they had their own city, whereas Jacob and his family were nomadic, meaning that they would move from place to place as it became necessary, and they were able to do that because they had tents, not buildings that they kept up. So this fella named Shechem liked Dinah. The problem was he didn't have any rules. His people did not have any rules about the way you should do things properly. And he decided he wanted her, so he took her. And turns out he really did like her and wanted to marry her. The rules then were pretty specific in that if you were a man and wanted to marry this woman, because it didn't really work the other way around, they didn't much care who the woman wanted to marry most of the time, then you would have your father go and talk to the father of the girl, and then they would work out an arrangement, and there would be a bridal price. That's the best way I can put it. Um, and this would be sort of considered gifts and all that to the bride's father because he's given up his daughter. She will no longer be part of his household. She'll become part of her husband's household. And so he's being compensated for that. So, whatever arrangement they would come up with, that would be settled. Then there would be the wedding, and everybody would move along with that. And often love was not even considered part of it. That was sort of a thing that, well, maybe it would happen later, that they would love each other. Okay, so not like things are for the most part now, but you need to know that. But you see, Shechem violated this because he did not go to his father to go to Dinah's father, Jacob, and arrange this. He just took her as his wife. And this did not sit well with Jacob. He found out about this. He was upset. And then his sons came in. And at this time, there were just the 11 sons. Benjamin had not yet been born. And really, I don't know that Joseph would have been a big part of all of this because he was pretty young. But he's aware of everything that's going on. So all of these older sons are pretty angry, and rightfully so. Um, but Shechem's dad comes over and he's trying to settle things, and then Shechem himself comes over and they're saying, no, no, let this be, we can intermarry and we'll all be together. Well, this is where we find that even though Jacob is following God and doing his best to get better and better at following God, his sons have heard this. but they have not accepted God's rules for themselves yet. And in some cases, we're not sure if they ever did. In others, we'll find out differently. Anyhow, um, it appears that somehow the sons start talking to Shechem's father and make an arrangement that Jacob does not know about. And they're saying, okay, the way to settle this is for all of the men in your household to be circumcised, and that's a special minor operation that all the men would have to have, and then they would all be considered acceptable, and we could intermarry, etc., etc. Everything would be fine. Now, this operation would cause pain for a number of days for these men, but in the scheme of things, that would be proper to do. However, two of the sons, Simeon and Levi, um, who were directly Dinah's brothers, decided, okay, we're going to take advantage of this. And so, about 3 days later, when all the men in Shechem's family group were still sore, they took their swords, went into the city, and killed all of the men. Well, this was a great deceit and violation of the agreement, not something God would have approved of. And they used God's um, framework to deceive these people and kill them. And then later on, the other brothers find out about this, and Jacob finds out about this. The other brothers come in, and okay, there's this small city, and there are no men left alive. They're just women and children, and then the things they own, and they take everything. And at first you think, yeah, that's pretty bad. They stole everything and they took the women who were there and took the children who were there. And while that is bad, it would have been worse had they left them alone because the women and children left behind would have had no one to protect them from anyone who wanted to come in and kill them and take everything. And at least by bringing them in to their group, there would be an assurance that these people would live. Um, would not have been pleasant for them, but if they consider that better than dying, then that was a better situation. Well, Jacob finds out about all of this, and he is understandably upset. And he says to these sons, do you know what you've done? You made us a stench in the nostrils of the Canaanites. Well, the Canaanites lived around them, and the Canaanites would look at this and say, these people are dangerous. We need to gather together and go wipe them out. And that's exactly what he says to his sons. Well, God comes to Jacob, talks to him, and says, all right, I want you to go to Bethel and build an altar. Well, Jacob had been there around 20 years before that when he was running away from home, well, running away from his brother. And so Jacob is doing it. But first, he tells everybody, if you've got any foreign god, meaning any idols, any of these pretend gods, anything associated with them, get rid of it. They can't go with us. And so they get rid of those items. They pack up and they go to Bethel. Well, God appears to Jacob again. And what we're seeing now is that, oh, God is now blessing Jacob. He even changes Jacob's name to Israel. Because if you remember, Jacob was kind of a name that you would give to somebody who um, told you things that were not true. His name meant he deceives. Now he's giving him the name of Israel, which contains God's own name in it, and he struggles with God. That's an acceptable name. And so he's changing his name, even though the Bible will continue to use one or the other names for him. As far as God's concerned, he is now Israel. So what we see here is that The sons have done a bad thing, but God is not holding Israel responsible for this. Each person is going to be responsible for himself. Now, somewhere during this time, his wife Rachel gives birth to her second son, Benjamin. But the childbirth goes badly for her, and she is dying from it. But she's able to give him the name um, Ben Oni, which is like son of my sorrow. And there's some dispute on exactly what the name would mean. And Jacob decides we're going to name him Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. So that's a very positive, strong name for him. She dies and is buried. And one last note in this story is that um, Jacob is able to go back and see his father Isaac. Now, when Jacob had to leave more than 20 years before, Isaac thought he was about to die. Turned out he lived to be about 130 years old, and Jacob has managed to come back with his family and see his father before he dies. And Esau is also there, and they have reunited. So the story starts off pretty rough based on the actions of some sons of Jacob, but it ends on a positive note as we're reminded that Esau and Jacob are now reconciled, even though Esau's family is going to divert farther and farther away from God over time. And Jacob's family doesn't look very much like it's going to follow God, but we'll see in upcoming stories that at least some of them, if not most of them, will turn to God, or at least their descendants will. So I'm going to stop at this point with this note that you can grow in your faith to God, and you can present this to other people, and you can be a strong influence on them. But as we see with Jacob, you cannot make somebody else believe in God and follow God. The best you can do is to do what you can to follow God and give them an example to go by. And the hope there is that at some point they may see how you have gone through life and realize that they want that for themselves. All right, today's tie is a little bit of a departure. I used the Star Wars characters because I wanted to give some idea of Jacob's sons. Because in Star Wars, you see you've got heroes. Uh, Here you have a woman, so you could think, okay, that could be Dinah in all of this. But all of these characters have different personalities, and you even have a couple who are really bad guys, but they're still part of the family. And in this sense, um, we can see that the same is true even in the people who have been blessed by God. You can have some who decide not to follow God. So, with that, I'm going to leave this lesson to you and hope you'll be back next time for the next lesson. Bye.